Hi guys, I'm Dan at vintagevelo.org, a website which has finally gone live, and we are here on our final part of the vintage Zeus race bike restoration. Now, we've already seen this bike before. It came in a very sorry looking state. If you haven't seen it, go back and watch that previous couple of videos. Great bike. Zeus themselves, if you remember, just to recap, they tasked themselves with making an entire bike, including the group set and the frames all the way down to the dropouts, and they were trying to build a better frame than Campagnolo and a better group set than Campagnolo. Though to be fair, they mostly copied the designs of both and then added a little extra on top of that. And what we have here is a late 70s Zeus 2000 frame with its original Zeus forks and dropouts and all of its, well, mostly its original parts that went with it, apart from the seat. Now, I've gone ahead and put a couple of small parts on here. I've pressed the headset races in here, the cups just to start off with, and I've got the drive side cup in there as well, because it's really quite tight, that, and getting it off and tight, putting it back in. So I wanted to do that very carefully so as not to ding the paint. But the results have come out very well from the repaint. Not as much gold on show as I expected, bearing in mind this is a candy black over gold. It's much more of a very glossy liquid black, but hey, I can live with that. It does look spectacular. So I'm very, very happy with the finish so far. Now we're going to go ahead and get the parts back on the bike. They're all on the bench. They've been cleaned up. No surprises at all, and it all came up really, really well. So I think the first thing to do, we're going to get straight in there. Let's get the bottom bracket in there. Loose bearings on this bottom bracket setup. The bearings themselves, the ball bearings weren't very good, so I've replaced those with a new set. And it's always a bit tricky because they're loose, so I may have to put this down on a chair just to get it in there. But we'll see what happens. Let's just go ahead. So when we're doing loose bearings in a bottom bracket cup, always handy, plenty of fresh grease, new bearings, put them in there and the grease should hold them in place, ready for assembly. Obviously on this one, a little bit more tricky because I'd already put the cup in, so I had to kind of use the grease on the outside of the spindle and then try and get them in there. All has gone well so far. Meant to be a slightly superior feel having loose bearings rather than a cage, but I'm pretty sure you can't tell the difference. But let's go ahead and get this one in there. Now that's always a joy when the bottom bracket assembles with no problems. Now next thing we're going to put on is this rather beautiful Zeus 2000 crankset. I did go ahead and have the chain rings anodized black. This is exactly how it would look on a factory option black option, yeah, they look really, really cool, and we'll go with the black and gold theme on this really well. Now, one thing, obviously, when you're assembling this with your bottom bracket spindle, if one end is longer than the other, that's the drive side, and this is distinctly longer. It's really, really obvious, but even so, when you assemble it, just hand assemble it, pop it in there, and just visually check your clearances. Make sure that your chain rings are not about to gouge straight into the paint work on your fresh frame. This one is absolutely fine. Also of note, on Zeus spindles and chain sets, they use a strange, I think they're making it themselves really, a bolt that is very, very tight in its clearances and tolerances to the actual crank arm. And you can get a specialist tool or a very just a simple online order of a tight clearance spark plug remover, and that seems to do the job nicely. So there you go, but we'll go ahead and just get this bit put together. they're on there. Headset time. Now when it comes to the fork and headset assembly on here, again, loose bearings, and we have got 22 in the top and 22 loose bearings in the bottom, all held in at the moment with a bit of fresh grease. Fingers crossed it'll go in place without dropping any. Great, bars are on there. As you can see, I've cleaned them up nicely. New hoods, new Bonotto tape, and a slightly longer 120mm stem, just to increase my reach a bit on here. Now, I think it's time to go ahead and put the wheels on there. And an interesting discovery. When I was cleaning up the rear wheel, and I was looking at removing the cassette, or freehub, freewheel, if you will, I noticed there was a lock ring on here. Now, we all know I do get mixed up talking about cassettes, freewheels and freehubs, and usually on a 7-speed it's a free hub. The whole thing is a solid chunk that you can then kind of split apart if you're lucky, but it can be a challenge. We all know cassettes come apart quite easily. Now, what it turned out on this one, never encountered it before, but it's a Taiwanese made thing, and it's a free hub body that goes on, big screw thread as usual on a free hub, but then it's yeah, kind of chamfered to take chain rings, as we would expect to see, just loose rings, as per a cassette with spacers. So I was able to pick up another cassette. This time this one has got a much more knee-friendly 13 to 28 going on. But what it means is I should be able to fit this on here, and if for any reason I want to swap ratios, or the 28 is just too big a jump for the rear derailleur, I can swap these around quite easily. So I quite like that. Yeah, top job. Never encountered that before, but every day's a school day. Now, continuing Zeus's pursuit of lightness, it's interesting when you have a good look at a set of the original Zeus pedals. They're very nice aluminium forged examples. They're pretty light. Again, I think all of these components are just going to add up to a bit of weight saving. I'm not going to weigh this one until we have it next to that Campagnolo Super, which is a similar size. It'll be fascinating to see them going head to head. But in the meantime, I'm going to carry on just with the assembly. Now our Zeus is starting to come together. Time to get the rear derailleur on there with all of its excellent lightened parts. I did strip this down and give it a re-grease and a clean up. One thing I noticed was a bit of damage here on the outer cage of the rear derailleur. It looks like it took a bit of a wallop at some point in its life. There was some good scuffing on the brake levers there, and as a precaution I did the string test to check the geometry of the frame was straight. That's a pretty simple thing. It's a piece of string you just put through the rear dropouts and you go around the head tube there, and then you measure the distance either side here on the seat tube. If that's the same either side, you know it's correct. This is absolutely fine, so whatever it did, it hasn't done it any harm. So I'm just going to go ahead and pop this on there. Then I think we're about ready to get some cables on the go. Well, the brake cable supplied is too short. That is a bit annoying. Okay, Back to the drawing board. Mental note to self, check the length of the brake cable supplied in case for any reason they've sent two shorter ones. Now I'm going to go ahead and trim all the cables. Some of you may know I'm not a big fan of ferrules, class ferrules on the end of my cables. I like a nice neat cut, and then I put a blob of super glue on the end of the cut cable. Now what that allows it to do is it stops it fraying, but if at any point I need to get the cables in or out again, you've got a good few goes of getting them in and out before they start to fray. Whereas I always find with a ferrule, once it's taken off, that's pretty much it for the cable. So I'm going to go ahead and get clipping. Well, now we've got something that does at least resemble a bike. We're going to go ahead now and fit the chain. Now, chain lengthwise, obviously new chain, I'm going to go with a big ring around the big cog at the back. The biggest one, I think this one's a 28. And then add 2 links and then play with it from there. The rear wheel is on. Interestingly of note, the rear spacing on this is 126, but the rear wheel is a 130 on that spindle length, so I had to stretch it just a little bit. I haven't cold set it, I've just stretched it. It fits in there. It's been on this bike for a number of years, so I figure we're okay running it on that. I'll check it a few times and see how it goes. If I'm at all worried, I'll take it back probably to a 6-speed, but for the moment we'll leave it with 7 and get this chain on there. Now that I like. Well, there we have it. Our late 70s Zeus 2000 is complete, fully restored and ready to ride. We're going to have to wait for better weather in the spring for that, including the weigh-in. I want this to go head-to-head directly with that Campagnolo Super we rode last year before, as this is its main rival, what it's designed to go up against. They're a similar size, actually. For those of you who need to know frame details, made of Reynolds 531 double-butted frame set. Excellent throughout, nice and light, and it's a 21-inch by 21-inch frame, which yes is a little tight for me, but I tend to work more from reach and stack, and I like to have that set about 78, and on this one I can't quite get to 78 centimeters. I'm at about 76, so I will be a little bit cramped, but it should be fine for you know, riding and testing and comparisons. Now, the bike itself, actually, yeah, I was really happy with how it went together. So far, pretty impressed with the Zeus machine work. Certainly the derailleur setup on this is fantastic. Apart from the fact the cranks and the group set looks gorgeous, it does actually change on the stand beautifully. So I'm really looking forward to getting this out there and putting it through its paces just to see how the overall package goes. But you're going to have to wait for better weather in the spring for that one. In the meantime, do like and subscribe for anything that's cool to do with vintage bikes. Thanks a lot.